That we're covering after inbound transportation is outbound transportation, and these are the learning objectives of the chapter. So, which means this is what you will be knowing at the end of the chapter or after learning about this chapter. So, as we have already in inbound transportation known that transportation is often one of the largest cost elements in the supply chain activities, and it needs to be taken into account when customer service levels are determined. And also, there are trading off decisions that needs to be made constantly within transportation. So, say for example, you are using air transport to transport goods, that cuts down on lead time and therefore it improves customer service, but it is more expensive than using road transport or maybe any other form of transport, which is slower. So that is something that we need to keep in mind. And then the terminologies, inbound transportation, material flows, and then obviously anything that goes out of the organization to the next supply chain partner or even to the final consumer or customer is outbound transportation. Okay, there is decision making involved as to how the movement of materials are going to happen, and because it involves revenue, so outbound transportation is a way of adding value, because remember in inbound it was raw materials, semi raw materials or equipments, assets that were coming in, but when it's outbound it's mostly the final product. So obviously it is going to add value to the company, in the form of utility, in the form of finances as well. Outbound transportation can be regional, it can be national, it can be international, or it can be a combination of all of them or two of them together. Then the transportation decisions in the supply chain. So there are certain conditions or factors that influence these decisions about trade-off when it comes to transport. The first one is geographical coverage. Now, the reach of the market, or how we arrive at the market, is affected by the ability of the transport system. So the cost is high to serve distant or rural markets because you have to reach out. So the type of product that is transported in terms of, for example, bulkiness, that is your volume; in terms of value, that is your cost of product; in terms of mass, that is your weight. These could affect the decisions to offer services to widely distributed or dispersed markets. So higher value products can generally be transported over longer distances, owing to the ability of such products to absorb in the transport cost, because they are highly valued, so your transport cost is covered. If not, if it is mass products, then it doesn't cover. So the more expensive the product is, the smaller the cost of transport will be as a percentage of the cost of final product. Next is sourcing decisions. Now we know South Africa as a country is known that imports more than it exports. So these sourcing decisions and final product costs are often affected by the cost and availability of transportation services that are available. Because the availability of a reliable, of a cost effective transportation service can affect the decision to import, and extend the scope of supply markets a lot. So, in case of your high value but low mass and low volume products, air freight is often the preferred mode because, again, like I said, high value products can cover that cost. While in case of lower value and high mass products with high volume, sea transport is the preferred mode because it can carry a bulk and it won't be as expensive as the air transport. Then we go to customer service. Now, the main objective of supply chain management, we know, we studied in the beginning also, is to satisfy our final consumer demands and also to make sure that we deliver the service to them. So, the more cost effective, the more reliable the transportation is, the better the customer service is, and then it will be delivered at an acceptable level of cost. It won't be too costly for the consumers. Then we have location. So transport systems, your road, rail, or airport, um, infrastructure, it does affect the decision about where to locate factories, where to locate the processing plants, where to locate warehouses. So they are also important factors when choosing a location to set up a unit or a warehouse. A simple example is Toyota. Their main assembly plant is located in Durban because it's close to the proximity of the port, the shipping port, that port. So then it's easy for them. So what do the retailers do? These retail chains, they try having large distribution centers in and around Midrand, and they can then easily transport them. They can transport them to other parts of Gauteng and other provinces in the country. Then we have transport cost and mode of selection. So we need to make sure that the right transport mode is chosen for particular circumstances, as transport costs often represent one of the highest cost elements in the supply chain. So it needs to be done effectively. Okay, selecting a road transport operator. Now, road transport is the most frequently used mode of transport in South Africa. So, the aim is to make sure that we are able to acquire a reliable and consistent transport service without increasing the price paid for such services. So manufacturers and retailers, they try to reach out to such transport suppliers with whom they can enter into partnerships that can almost complement their business. Okay, then okay, there is this table that I will take a image and send it to you all. But then coming down next to indicate the different type of carriers also. But in the criteria for selecting road transport operators, there are various criterias. Um, there is economic criteria, obviously the cost involved. There is management, the administrative part of it. How is the company's management? How do they view and value this mode of transportation? What are the technicalities involved in terms of maintenance, in terms of road safety? Then legal, obviously we all know the contractual agreements, the legislative agreements, and also a responsibility, who's going to be responsible. Then the operational part is your flexibility. Are you able to reach to the market? Do you have the ability to add additional capacity? So the whole operational part of it. You have warehouses. Does it involve any inter transport? Can the business comply with just in time? So all these form part of the operational part. Then experience obviously is the skills, how experienced you are, what is your customer base, what is your nature of customer base, and then what is the capacity of your company to handle such kind of workload. So that all falls under experience. Then moving on to indirect carriers. Now, indirect carriers are where some companies, they do not own transport equipments, but they contract with carriers for capacity to transport their goods. So a number of indirect carriers, you would see they are found in market. They are also called as transport brokers. They are called as third party logistics. Some of them also are called as fourth party logistics. Okay, so they are indirect carriers. Now, out of these indirect carriers, the first one is a transport broker. A transport broker is basically they are companies that provide services to both the owner of the goods that needs to be transported and also to the carrier, which means the person that is carrying or transporting your services or your products. And they also charge a fee, obviously, which is a percentage of the revenue that is being collected, and the broker in turn receives a full amount that is owed by the person who is shipping it. Okay, then pro at times they also negotiate their rates. They make sure that they oversee the shipments and do keep in mind that even though they are not able to perform some of the personal constraints, but they almost overlook the whole shipping process. um, so that's your transport brokers. Then we have freight forwarders. Okay. Now, who are these freight forwarders? They are found across all the modes of transport. So they are the ones who undertake a number of functions on behalf of the shippers, the ones who are shipping, okay, and the consignments. So they offer documentation, they offer customer clearance services. So they take responsibility of that if it involves international shipment, even if within nation, if they need some kind of customer clearances for certain products, because it is regional or because it has some regulations on it, so they make sure that they deal with it. So the consolidation of shipments would also mean that with small consignments they can have access to lower rates, okay, if there are larger grouped consignments. So these freight forwarders, they are also like sales agents that make bookings with airlines, they make bookings with shipping companies, and also with rail and road transport operators. They do that on behalf of the shippers. Now, they are also generally the ones that purchase transport services from the transport operators, and in sometimes they also have their own equipment that needs to that is part of transportation. Okay. Then we speak about outsourcing versus owning your own fleet, means owning your own vehicles. Okay. So outsourcing, obviously, where we use third party logistics service providers. They are companies that specialize in transport, that specialize in logistic activities. They provide services where they sell their services to mining, to manufacturing, to retail organizations as well, in terms of transportation, in terms of logistics. So they therefore perform almost all of a client's supply chain logistic activities, and obviously in return for money. The range of services that these third party logistics offer is large. It can be as simple as arranging transportation for a single shipment, or it can be as complex as designing, implementing, and operating a whole organization's entire distribution and logistic systems. So there are domestic third party logistics also, and so are international third party logistics who deal with both import and export logistics. Okay. So the most commonly outsourced logistic functions and transportation services, warehouse management and shipment consolidation are some of the activities or degrees of warehousing. Other functions also are logistic information systems. They do carrier selection, they negotiate the prices, they also do product returns. They deal with fleet management, which means managing of people and transport systems, their operation. They deal with relabeling or packaging, and they deal with order fulfillment. There is customer spare parts, if there is consultation, inventory replenishment. So they do a whole lot of activities um, as part of outsourcing. Now, this here, as you can see in the figure, so when it comes to making a decision to outsource or to keep the function on in the organization, it's almost as an important strategic decision. It has long-term implications, and it can therefore only be made after a complete and thorough analysis. So this figure here, it's almost showing different degrees of outsourcing in transportation. So if a company has its own in-house services, as you can see in company A, let me just enhance, yeah, as you can see in company A, they have just logistics involved, which is in-house. Then there are third-party outsourcing options, which is your third-party logistics. Then there will be companies within third-party logistics. We will have more than one third-party logistic company, perhaps because they are a big company or they have different suppliers, so they are allocating different third-party logistics for different kind of suppliers. Then there is fourth party logistics as well. Now, fourth party logistics basically is like a management company who is handling the manufacturing company or the retail company. So any supply chain partner, like you can see on your left, company A and B, and on the other side, they are managing these third party logistics. So that is why they are called as fourth party logistics, because they manage these two different parties. And again, this happens when the organization is either not able to find a proper third party logistics provider, or the organization is big enough to handle but doesn't have expertise in handling third party logistics. So in that cases, to pay attention to detail, they hire fourth party logistics, which are again companies, but they more or less perform the managerial function for the client. So the networking part, making sure that they act as an interface between the client and the different third party logistics. They also kind of meet and set up a good and healthy managerial relationship as well. Now, I've already discussed about it, the reason for outsourcing transportation services, so that the company can focus on their own area of expertise and leave the rest to the experts. And also, investing in their own transportation, they can also almost block their capital investment, where they could use that money somewhere else, either in buying equipments or raw materials. That's why it's preferable for companies, most companies, to outsource their transport activities. They don't have to manage, they don't have to hire separate staff and manage them. So it can affect them in many ways. Therefore, it's preferred to have outsourced. But if the companies feel that owning their own transportation is viable, and that is only possible if you have a smaller company, or you are an entrepreneur where you can have your own logistics, you can manage your core business and look after the logistics. Okay. Then again, making sure that you are not going to look after the infrastructure of your own vehicle, you are not going to look at the administration system. So all of that is handled to the third party logistics provider. Now, what are the advantages if you have your own fleet or range of vehicles? Obviously, there is complete control. You can keep a track on the flow of products if there is more than one plant. And then, if there is any crisis, you can quickly make a decision and change it around, because now the vehicles are just outside your company premises. So you can just have them transport at any point of time, even if there are delays. Whereas if it is third party, you cannot change timings, you have to stick to the time of deliveries. You will have your own staff who is going to be responsible for driving the vehicle or loading and unloading the vehicle. So they will know to handle the materials better. You will have reliable staff who will be responsible for the process in transit, and then you can control on the volume. There is a bit of higher security because you know they are your own staff, and that they won't take chances. So there is some advantages of having your own fleet as well. But disadvantages, again, you need skilled people, you need to have people who are expert in logistics or in driving, and it needs capital investment to buy your vehicles, to pay salaries to these people. It almost adds to the overhead costs, where you have to make sure you have to keep the factors of maintenance, equipment, spares, repairs, all of that in mind as additional cost. There can be seasonal fluctuations, which means you're paying your driver or other people assisting in that process for the whole year, but you only need them for 8 months. So that is also, that could affect. Now these people are sitting idle doing nothing. They might decide on quitting the job because they don't have much to do. It can affect your whole management as well, the team that is responsible, and it can be leading to some sort of labor disputes as well. It can affect on the distribution process if there are disputes. Then I spoke about fourth party logistics. I said what their role is. I said how their presence affects and assists both the third party logistics and the supply chain partner as well. Okay. Then we move on to reverse logistics. So just by definition, reverse logistics is basically it's a specialized segment of logistics where the focus is on movement and management of products and resources after the sale and after the delivery to the customer. So it's after sale services and backward return. It includes returns. It could be about unhappiness of the towards the product. It could be about repair. It could also be about credit. So reverse logistics could involve any of them. It could also be a process that sort of enables organizations to become more environmentally able when it comes to recycling, reusing, and reducing the amount of material use. So the bottom line basically is that the materials or items they must be transported in the opposite direction from the customer or any place in the supply chain to the source of origin to make sure that it comes back from where it initially was generated. Okay, then this is to show the stages of the return process in reverse logistics, where the product is collected, it is inspected, and then it's sorted and separated, and then there is recovery and disposition. So when it is being separated and sorted, it depends on what stage the product is. Is it just a normal return because we are not happy with the product, the sizing, or whatever it is, or is it to do with a damage or a repair? So they need to be sorted accordingly. Okay, when in collection, I said it needs to involve your transportation, it needs to be consolidation. At times there is transshipment and then storage, and further there is then inspection, separation, and sorting. And then in the stage of recovery and disposition is where you are recovering, as the word says, the value from the returned product, if it is possible to recover certain parts or materials of it to be reused. Product disposition is where um, there are different ways companies attempt to recover the cost of the product. That is when you're trying to disposing the product. Can we sell certain parts of the product as a company and earn something out of it? Then disposition is obviously where it involves putting the product back into inventory or into a temporary storage where it can be repacked or refurbished, or it can be remanufactured and given its original shape back again. Okay, if none of them work, then the final disposition stage is when it literally returns, or it returns that stage where um, it's exited and can never be reused in any form. So in reverse logistics, there are few options that are also adopted where it can be returned to the seller, where it can be resold, it can be redistributed, or if none of these two steps work, then it's salvaged, obviously means disposed and thrown away. Remanufactured if it needs a little tweaking around, if it can be just fixed. Even it works for clothing where it is a broken button or something and it goes back and the button is fixed. So it is a little step in the process of remanufacture. Then we know recycling, where we are reducing the products to their basic elements. We are collecting these used products or materials and we sort of disassembling them, and then we are separating them into categories and see if we can process and recycle it. Donating is when we know that nothing much could be done. The companies decide to give return products to charity organizations without any kind of compensation that they expect in return. And disposing is where the product cannot be reused for, it can be technical reasons, it can be cost also. So if it's a mass manufactured product for worth 10 rand or 20 rand, then or depends, if it is made with very low cost price, then it's almost easier to dispose over remaking it in any form of remanufacture or recycle, because it can pose to be more costlier. So this is basically what I've spoken about. The figure is to highlight just this reverse logistics activities and what can happen, um, at what stage the product is, or it can be remade to something else, or does it go finally to the landfill? Does it need a remanufacture, or can it be recycled? Depends on what stage the product has been returned back. Okay, so that's about it in the chapter. Thank you.